And I just sort of zoomed out a little bit. I was like, there's this whole game, there's this whole conversation, there's all these stories around things, and they're creating an emotional experience in my body. And if I can just zoom out for a second and be like, wait a minute, that's all a big game. I don't have to be at risk unless I buy into it. And so I started seeing that the risk that we take on is in part, there's a reality out there, but it's in part my created world from the inside out. And it's given me a lot of freedom. And through that freedom, I now have a fantastic credit score and I pay everything. I don't carry personal debt, but I use debt for leverage. And I've built myself back up. And I'm playing the game, but I'm playing it from a different perceptive position, the position of knowing that it's all made up and it doesn't have power over me anymore. It has power, but I use it.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is John Patrick Morgan to chat about achieving the life you are meant to live. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Alan Watts. What do you desire? What makes you itch? If you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living. That is, to go on doing the things you do not like. That sounds like a pretty miserable existence. I hope you love what you do every day. I hope the work that you do serves you and it's fun and enjoyable. If it's not, join the Great Resignation and find something that excites you. How is 22 starting out for you? As we chatted about last week, baby steps and taking action compounds. Let's make sure this year is the best year ever and moves you towards the life you are meant to live. First part of that, you need to define it. Be clear and make sure you have the right choices and then keep moving forward. And don't forget to review those plans every year because, hey, I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. So I'm going to have a different goal for the next year. I know 2022, whole year of change for us again. So I've got new goals and we'll see how they roll. I've been reading a lot of books about spirituality lately, and a few concepts keep coming up. One is that we have everything we need inside of us, and it doesn't matter your current situation. So stop looking for answers outside. They're all within. The second is our words and thoughts are what drive us towards that connection with the universe, or do they drive us away from it? Our future is decided by us, not anyone outside of us or a situation outside of us. You have to decide, and then you have to become the person you need to be to achieve that future. We're going to chat a lot about this with our guest today. Listen into the way he thinks and how he uses words. We're just understanding the science of the universe. And I think one day we're going to laugh at us like they laugh at the people who thought the world was flat. There's so much we're still naive to. And the reality is, it's not our fault. One big practice for me for 2022 is to slow down and be present in each moment. So simple and yet so hard. Our guest today is John Patrick Morgan. He is a philosopher and a champion for being. He leads a team of creating champions who teach, coach, and guide thousands of entrepreneurs and artists in being more free, loving, and powerful. By learning and embodying the creative perspective, their clients achieve a union of outcomes in spiritual growth, material success, and social impact. Post his formal studies in physics and mathematics, John Patrick built multiple small businesses, developed real estate, traveled the world for years on end, coached human rights leaders, recorded albums and toured with his bands, created a kids' library in Cambodia, learned to scuba dive and pilot gliders, published writing and photography, competed in a black belt and triathlon. And he trained with Buddhist monks in India, cycled and toured for many other adventures. In recent years, his adventures have turned inward as his family came to be. He and his wife now reside with their 2 young boys in Maui on the side of a mountain. The foundation of John Patrick Morgan's role as a philosopher, teacher, and guide is his being a real-world practitioner. He walks his talk, lives what he teaches, and has a genuine and powerful commitment to creating everybody. Let's meet John. Welcome to Richer Soul, John Patrick Morgan. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, Rocky.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Man, 364 Butternut Drive, North Kingstown, Rhode Island. That's where I lived. Everybody's got a memory from their childhood of that house, really special feeling. We moved out, when I was probably 10 or 12, but suburb, cul-de-sac, kind of circle roundabout, and in New England from Rhode Island, and summers and winter. Just thank you for that question. So beautiful remembering that time of my life. I was so blessed and so lucky. The context of this podcast interview, I'm thinking about money, and I'm thinking about, there was that time that suddenly we got a pool dug in our backyard. So that's interesting. Nobody else has a pool. So something's going on here. I remember my dad coming home with Amway products, like little side jobs, because he was a cop, right? But there's just things happening. Then for a while, there was a truck out in the driveway that said Sunbright Carpet Cleaning. That was my dad's kind of like entrepreneurial dipping. And there was all these business cards. It's just suddenly that was like making money and creating a different life was a thing. And then when I was 10 or 12, we moved into a bigger house, 3-car garage. And it was like, that's not everybody's story, but like that, I think that those early lessons of like, there's what is, and then there's something more can be created was really formed my understanding of the world and my personality and my sense of what's possible. And my dad ended up retiring early from the police department and, making enough money as an entrepreneur. So I'm very conscious that when I work with clients that are newly out of corporate, as I work with entrepreneurs, sometimes new, sometimes seasoned, but that shift, that's a massive paradigm shift, the movement from like working for somebody to working for yourself. And I'm very conscious of like my orientation as an entrepreneur is something that I learned at a very young age. And a lot of it was just unconscious learning about how to think about money, how money can be created from nothing. So I was very blessed, and my dad's, was luckily healthy and still alive, and we get to have a great relationship. But I'm talking about my dad because I essentially learned how to be with money, mostly from my dad. My mom was an incredible example of self-love and compassion. I've learned all that from her, but I say power and money. My dad taught me a lot about that. So thanks for the memory lane trip. That was sweet.
So when you say he taught, did he actually teach you, or were you just watching what he was doing?
Just watching. My dad literally intentionally taught me nothing. I can't remember a single time where my dad's like, I'm going to teach you something, but I got to hang out with him all the time. he took me with him when we went to collect rent. I remember being like 8 years old, sitting in the car and somebody calling him up and saying, "Hey, my toilet's broken. You know, somebody can fix it." He said, "Hold on." And he hung up, called somebody else, say, "Hey, I need you to go over there and fix this toilet." "How much?" "100. Okay. Call the person back. It's $200. I'm going to send the guy over." It's like, "Wait a minute, Dad, but I thought you said it was 100. He's like, "Yeah, I got to make something." And I was young, right? So it was like, wait, it's that easy? You can just make money like that? And now my dad owns the biggest property management company in Rhode Island. And it's based off that simple concept, just being in the middle of maintenance and management of property. And so I've seen how those little, so that's all my learning was, just being around it, immersing myself in it. And I've essentially not just learned from my dad that way, but I've taken that as my strategy in learning and growth throughout my life. As I've sought out people who are really great. It's like, how can I just be around this person and spend time with them? I saw the book on your shelf, Profit First, Mike Michalowicz, and I hired Amber Duggar, one of his colleagues, just to be around her. Yeah, I did her course, which was fantastic, but like, I wanted to actually just be immersed in a person's way of meeting the world and thinking around money that could have me manage my cash better. And so I think in a way I was lucky that my dad was not a conscious, explicit teacher, that it came through implicit lessons. And as a dad myself, I'm trying to prioritize modeling for my kids and letting them be around me more than trying to like tell them the right things. It's hard because I want to teach, but I know that it's the implicit's actually a really powerful way of teaching.
So I know with our kids, we did both. We modeled, but then the way we got them to learn money was to give them money and then have conversations at their level around money for the choices they needed to make, not trying to talk above them or to things that they wouldn't understand, but how does money relate in their day-to-day life from the standpoint of you want toys, you want candy, you want these types of things. How are you going to be able to get it?
Yeah. As you say that, I'm thinking, you know what? My dad may have been intentionally teaching me. I just didn't know. Because as you say that, I'm like, my dad got me to get a job. He wouldn't give me money just because I wanted it. My dad would give me money. I mean, I did allowance when I was younger, but I remember it's like, I'll help you. I'll help you buy that bike. You go make 500 and I'll double it. But it wasn't going to give me anything unless I created. So he was still like generous and giving, but it wasn't so I did learn. He did. So there probably was more explicit, intentional thing going on with my dad than I realized, but it just wasn't like, okay, now we're going to sit down like schoolwork and like learn about money. There was no like birds and the bees conversation, like where it's like, it's time to talk about it now, but I certainly was being taught, I guess. Yeah. That's a good thing. Thanks for pointing that out because that's a great distinction. Yeah. Intentional, but not obvious teaching.
We like to trick our kids.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it. I'm going to take that on.
You trick them into learning. You trick them into doing things. But again, that's why I said you have to be at their level. And you have to create the opportunities for them to do things. And my kids learn by buying candy and buying toys and saving up for a trampoline and trying out businesses and all of those things. But I always say with kids, you have to let them pull. You don't want to push them. It's much because then it becomes a battle. But if they're pulling, then it becomes easy to teach as they pull.
I like that. Cool. My mind's already spinning. I've got a 5-year-old and he's just starting to be interested in money. So now's the time. Cool. Fun.
That is the perfect age to start. That's when we really went hardcore with our kids as far as giving them money and letting them make choices. It's amazing how many choices they can make. They're naturally wired to knowing how to manage money and how to spend yours.
Yeah, cool. I like that thought. Yeah, not that they're naturally wired. Sweet.
Taking a step back, you mentioned Profit First. How did that help your business?
Well, I've always been focused on creating money, in the money domain, not conserving it. My personality style is just to live for the experience, carpe diem, seize the day. And in a lot of ways, that is my willingness to be free and to not be too worried about the future is my strength and my gift and my contribution. I help my clients to be free from their worries or concerns about things. But everything that's a strength is also a weakness, right? And so the dark side of that is, you're always going and creating the next thing. We're always living just within our means. As I expanded my revenue, I expanded my expenses. So yes, I was making more and more, but I was spending more and more. And so it really hit me when having kids. It's like, okay, now I've got, if I was flying twice a month to see a mentor for a while. And if the plane hit the ground, like, and I died, then, well, shit, he's not going to have any money even to make it through rent next month. So I better like think about this, got some life insurance, but also started to think, man, how could I start to be a little bit more conservative? And at that point, it was like, that would be a good thing to do. That would be responsible. But in hindsight, now that I've, read Profit First and implemented that system, and now we're years later and we've got a lot more cash in the bank, months and months of reserves. And it's just awesome. Like what I'm realizing, it's not just about like being more responsible. It's like the flexibility that gives me and how agile I am now, and how I went from being a sole proprietor coach to having a team who coach for me and a sales team, and having agencies that we hire for marketing. It's like all of that stuff wasn't even within my purview before because I didn't have the cash to even think about it. And so actually the biggest shift was how it changed my way of thinking about what's possible. Having that financial cushion, like I told you earlier before we started recording, I have a house in contract, $2 million here in Maui that we're going to close on in a few weeks. And that I wasn't even dreaming that before because the cash wasn't there. And so the thing that's changed most of all through it is realizing that so much more for me is possible that I wasn't even allowing myself to consider because of the way that I was managing my cash.
Profit First is based on the principle, pay yourself first. So for those people who are W-2 employees, pay yourself first, like put money into savings before you spend it. Because as you said, we all have that natural habit. The more we make, the more we spend. And it's when we can increase the gap between what comes in and what goes out that we build excess. And once you start to build excess, you get the freedom to make choices in life you never thought possible. And you're showing us that with the way you've done things. I know for me, that's the way I built wealth, just by increasing the gap little by little over time and letting it go. You talked about knowing your gifts. How did you figure out what your gifts were? Because I don't think most people spend the time to truly understand that.
Well, it actually started through, I guess you could call it a selfish orientation, which was like, I'm only going to do what I love to do. And I've just chased my dreams. And it was very kind of self-oriented in the beginning, traveling the world, going on adventures, designing websites because I thought that was fun and interesting, studied math and physics at university, just because that's what I like, not because it would contribute in any way. But what I saw is that like somehow things were working out for me. And as I started to reflect on on it, it was like, wait a minute, maybe me only doing what I love and always doing what I love, maybe that is my highest contribution. And now looking back and being older and that's like kind of my core philosophy. It's like when we do what we love, we actually are giving our greatest gifts. Like people like, oh, I want to go travel. And it's like, if anybody goes and travels long enough, it's self-serving in the beginning, but then you're feeding your soul. And then you want to contribute. You take pictures and you share them, or you blog about it, or like, even if you stay within the domain of traveling, it becomes a contribution in some way naturally. It's very hard to give yourself exactly what you want without wanting to give back. And so it's, I think just kind of seeing the world that way and then with my work with clients, it's like helping them to identify what would you love to do. And it's like, well, I can't make money doing that. But if you just actually give it to yourself long enough, you're going to find that your heart naturally wants to contribute. You want to reciprocate, and it starts to find its way out and make a difference in the world because there's doing what you love. And it's like, if it's just for you, it's not going to help people and make a difference. But like over time, it starts to become a contribution. We can create examples to make it more concrete if you'd like, but that's essentially what it's like for me.
Let's do that. Let's make it concrete.
Like I said, I loved doing websites. It was just interesting to me. I studied computational physics and like writing code. It was kind of a creative outlet. But then I was like, oh, I'm doing these websites and I can my friend needs one. So cool. I'll do one for you too, because I love doing it. And then suddenly I've done one for him and then his friend wants one. Cool. And then I've done a few of them for people. And it's like, I don't really have the time to keep doing it for everybody, but what if you paid me? And then suddenly I'm starting to do websites for money. And fast forward a few years and we're launching a $250,000 website at the NASDAQ building in Times Square with my web media team. Because like we just came from doing what we loved. My friend loved taking pictures and now his photos are being shown in Times Square. as part of this campaign launch, because it's like you just do what you love, and when you're enjoying it, it becomes a contribution. And if you keep contributing, suddenly you don't have time to give to everybody who wants it. And then you put a price on it, and then suddenly you're getting paid for it. And I also believe that like when you do what you love, it's magnetic. There's a coherence to it. People want to be around that. They want to work with people who are passionate about their work. It makes it easier for people to say yes, as you're not actually primarily oriented or interested in getting their money. You're actually primarily oriented and interested in creating what it is that you're doing that you love. So it's genuine. They can feel your commitment to service. And so everything goes up. And so that's in the domain of web media. When I was in real estate, like just being so fascinated and interested with what could be created in real estate, and having conversations with people about selling their house from the excitement about the possibility of this creation. As people trust you, it's like, oh, you're not just trying to get my percentage when I was a realtor as a listing. You're actually excited about selling the house for us and our sake. Genuinely, it's like, because I love that. I love people. And so, and now with my coaching work, it's like somebody asked me the other day, it's like, how do you know where to go in your coaching with person? Well, it's like, well, I go with them in the place that I'd go with myself that's interesting and important to me. I love freedom, I love love, and I love power. And when I say power, I mean making a difference in a certain amount of time. And so if somebody's got a problem going on in their life, I'm going to help them be more free, create more of a loving way of being, or be more powerful. If you brought some other coach in, they're going to do something else. I don't care as much about what you need or want as I do what I want to give you. I know that sounds crazy and selfish, but actually my highest contribution is what I would most love to give you, not what you most need or want, because I might not be as good at giving you what you need or want in that way as I would giving you what I've got. It's like a mechanic's a great mechanic and you're going to have him build your house. You'd be like, you're going to get more value from that guy with your car. Don't try and get him building your house. So when you do what you love, you're making your highest contribution, whatever it is. And it's magnetic and people want to be around it and they trust you because there's coherence.
Do you find most people do what they love?
No, a million miles away. Most people don't do what they love. And out of those people, I would say most of those people don't even know what they love because they've not done what they love for so long because they were told that wasn't okay or not enough that they can't even feel it anymore. They have no idea. And so when you ask somebody, what would you love to do? They're like, I don't know. I can't even feel my body. Never mind know what I love. And I say that not to judge. I mean, it's a heartbreaking, sad thing, but, people are, there's a very strong cultural idea that that's not okay. That's not enough. That's not okay. I mean, it's even sinful in a lot of ways sometimes.
How is it sinful?
Well, it's looked down upon. Like you're selfish or you're just concerned with yourself. You can't just, it's the struggling artist. It's like kind of idea. Like you can't just do that. Sinful, not in a religious way, but like culturally, like so socially, like it's looked down upon. And my wife comes from an Indian family, and it's like in her family, it was like, if you're not going to be a dentist or a doctor or an engineer, like the family's going to talk about you. And so she went and did that thing. She became an optometrist, ticked that box. And for 15 years, that's what she did, but she didn't love it. And we met when she was starting to explore other things. And now she has completely let her optometry career go. And she spent 6 years studying wine. She's on track to be a master of wine. She was awarded on stage in London for one of the highest marks in her wine education diploma across the world. And she loves it. She loves her work. She's just in the other room right now, half asleep because she's up with the baby all night, but she's studying wine. She's like, I just love it. I don't know. And that will become a contribution, and she'll create a wine tasting education company, and it will be very successful because she loves it.
And yet there's the people who, as you said, the starving artist. Like, how do you go from starving artist to somebody who does? Because there's many people who spend quite a few years starving in trying to do what they love.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most famous artists in history starved until they died, and then they became famous after. And so, look, it doesn't need to be black and white, right? Like if you could go all in, you could be like, it matters more to me that I do what I love than whether I ever make a penny. And if that's your orientation, if you're going to be absolute about it, then you're making a choice to starve so you can do your art. And so for me, that's just as awesome as somebody who's, making money. It's like that commitment to what you love is most important, then cool. but you don't have to go all that way. You can be like, I love my art and I want to make some money to pay the rent. So I'm going to bring it a little bit in the direction of an artisan, or I'm going to do this in a way within the container of a thing called graphic design or something. And it's expressed, but I'm making a little bit of a sacrifice. It's just that people tend to sacrifice completely and don't even touch the thing that they love. So it's like, for me, it's more of like a continuum. You don't have to go all in right away, and just, especially once you've built, if you've got a family or something like that, you don't have to like throw everything out, at risk or at sea just to be able to do it. But as you lean into it and breathe life into it, and I think you come alive in a way that bends the curve. It makes it more likely that it's going to work.
And there's a lot of fear in that for a lot of people, yes, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But you can take small baby steps towards something. You do it on the side, and you keep working at it, because if you love it, it's fun. It's not really work. No. It's enjoyable, and you roll with it.
Yeah, you can. It's like, I don't end up with too many people that want a baby step, because while there's nothing wrong with it, it's completely a way. It's just that I am interested in helping people create a radical experience of freedom from the inside out that makes those things that before felt really scary not so scary, because you realize that the fear that you were experiencing was actually created based on your own internal world. Like, I just shot a video the other day for my clients talking about like risk nothing to risk everything. And I was talking about how like in money, like one of the ways to grow faster is to take on more risk. Of course, right? Like risk equals reward. You take on higher risk, you could create a higher reward, but there's more risk involved. And so it's like, if I make a big investment in something, the higher risk is that I could lose that money, but I could also create a bigger reward. So what do I have to do? I have to be able to stomach that risk. And those who have more ability to stomach greater risk have a better chance to make a higher reward. That's one way of looking at it. But if you actually look at the fact that the risk that a person is experiencing isn't de facto based on circumstances. There's a circumstance out there, of course. There's how much money is actually in the account or not in the account. But then there's like, what does that actually mean? How are you representing that in your mind? And that creates your personalized experience of that risk. And so what I found is that it's not like people who take bigger risks just are able to stomach that more. It's that they are not as threatened by the consequence. And so as you look at it, you're like, oh, wait, what would actually happen? Oh, I might lose my house. Okay. And then what? Well, then I guess we'd have to rent somewhere. Okay. And then what? And then I'd go make more money and we'd buy another house. Okay. So it's not so bad. And if you actually look at the thing that you're afraid of, a lot of times you might realize it just kind of like goes up on a puff of smoke. And you realize that, geez, I don't actually need to be that afraid. It's not actually that bad. And when you look at the most successful entrepreneurs who have grown and scaled things, like they actually have a litany of, explosions as well, like multiple bankruptcies. It's like, it's not, so that those things go hand in hand. So it's not just the risk equals reward. It's like, it's the mitigation of risk or the diminishing of risk to when you actually see that there's not that much actually at risk. I had a great experience with money when I realized that like the experience of my debt that I had like 10, 15 years ago was I had a lot of shame around my credit card debt. And again, lessons from my dad, but my dad said, what are you ashamed for? And I was like, just, it's not bad. I have a like low credit score. I'd never missed a payment. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, I'm going to miss a payment. I don't have the cash. And he's like, just stop paying them. And I was like, what? You can't do that. He's like, what are they going to do? I was like, I don't know. He's like, it's unsecured debt. They don't have any security. Like you can't do anything. I was like, what about the credit score? He's like, so what? You can build it back. I was like, shit, that was crazy. So I was living in London at the time and I just stopped paying my credit cards and nothing bad happened. I mean, my credit score tanked, but I just found out like after 7 years of no activity, that just vanished from my credit report. It's like that never happened. And there's like a biblical root to that, by the way. It's saying Deuteronomy about stuff that after 7 years, your debt shall be forgiven. So it's like, but I share that because like I started to see that like, there's this whole story. And where did the money come from that they lended me? Because shouldn't they give that back to them? Oh, wait, they created it through fractional reserve banking. It's not something they had and gave to me. It's something they made magically. Oh, wait, maybe so I did the same thing. Maybe I just magically made it disappear. And I just sort of zoomed out a little bit. I was like, there's this whole game, there's this whole conversation, there's all these stories around things. and they're creating an emotional experience in my body. And if I can just zoom out for a second and be like, wait a minute, that's all a big game. I don't have to be at risk unless I buy into it. And so I started seeing that the risk that we take on is in part, there's a reality out there, but it's in part my created world from the inside out. And it's given me a lot of freedom. And through that freedom, I now have a fantastic credit score and I pay everything. I don't carry personal debt, but I use debt for leverage. And I've built myself back up and I'm playing the game, but I'm playing it from a different perceptive position, the position of knowing that it's all made up and it doesn't have power over me anymore. It has power, but I use it.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. What are some of the other things that we make up in our mind?
For me, everything that we experience is made up. That doesn't mean that everything out there is made up, but everything we experience is made up. I just coaching my team this morning and, this potential client responded to one of my team members in a certain way and she was offended by it. Whatever he said offended her. And if I share what it was, it doesn't matter what it is, but if I share what it was, everybody would be like, well, yeah, that's offensive. Let me give an example that's not personal for her, but let me just take it out to some things. Somebody said the other day, oh yeah, this person ghosted me. This was a client saying this in a program. This person ghosted me. And I was like, wow, nobody's ever ghosted me. I said, really? I said, yeah, that's because I'm unghostable. In order to be ghosted by somebody, that would mean you would have to write somebody a message. They would have to not write back. And then I would have to take their not writing back as meaning they ghosted me. And then I experience being ghosted. So everything that we experience is the meaning we put on what's happening out there. So I choose that you can't ghost me because no matter if I wrote you and you didn't respond, that's not what happened. You just didn't respond. Maybe it's because you're sick. Maybe it's because you couldn't hear me and what I was trying to share with you. It's so everything, that's my answer, everything.
And usually when you're ghosted, it's because the other person's afraid.
Probably.
Or there's some other emotional thing going on with them that they're not willing to deal with the situation. And so they're the one running away.
So when somebody doesn't respond, I would say that's typically because they're afraid. But I wouldn't say when I'm ghosted, it's because they're afraid, because I'm not going to take on that meaning, even in a way to try to justify it. So I'm very, very specific with the way that I speak, because our speaking creates our experience and our reality. And I don't want to build up ghostability and then have to overcome it by justifying why they've ghosted me, because I'm just not unghostable. On the footer of my email, I have the Aramaic words abracadabra, which means I create as I speak. We know it as abracadabra. I create as I speak. It is through my speaking that I create my way of seeing the world and my experience of the world. So I'm very, very specific when it comes to language. It's as soon as we joined on this call, that's why I started reading all the titles, all the words on your books in the background, which I love. Yeah, very attentive to that.
And we've had a lot of guests lately who are very precise in the language. And again, it's our programming, right? When we say certain things, we're essentially revealing our programming. And so our subconscious mind will take what we say and start working on it. So be very careful with where you send it and learn to let go. And I probably need to spend more time listening to myself, because we don't listen to ourselves. And I think the best way to do that is probably to record the conversations and go back and listen. And it's amazing what you don't hear until you do it a few times. And
I say, watch your mouth. it's kind of like tongue in cheek because it's like, somebody says it to you when you're a kid and you curse, but like just being present with your speaking is like a biblical scripture. I'm not a super religious guy, but I've mentioned the Bible a couple of times. But anyway, there's like this biblical scripture that like the tongue is the rudder of the ship. Right. And it's like, watch what you say, because it's like we listen with our mouth. The way that we speak is an expression of the way that we're thinking. And that is literally the meaning map that we have. That's like taking all of this external input and generating experience for us. But it comes out of our mouth.
We definitely need to watch what we're saying and what we're doing. So I want to take a step back, because this is a quote that I heard from you. You say, I love to take things apart and put them back together again. I loved it so much that I began doing it with my own life in mind, taking apart my thoughts and rebuilding them to fit how I wanted to be in the world. I'd love to dig into that. What is that like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been doing that since I was a kid, like just trying to, as soon as I became aware that I was thinking, right? Like some people get that when they're young, some older, but in any case, for some reason I became aware that I was thinking. And then I started to realize that like the way that I was thinking was creating my experience. And so it's like, if I could think differently, I could experience differently. I remember just when I was studying physics, like that's the way that I was starting to understand myself. And I've continued on that path, and that's become basically the essence of my work, is helping people to think differently so that they experience differently, so that they act differently, so that they create different results. But what came to mind as you were speaking, I'll just riff on that, is my kind of deep study of the work of George Lakoff, a cognitive scientist, philosopher. And he helped me to really get how we construct our reality through metaphor, and that we actually have what he calls a conceptual map. Like every idea is connected to some other idea. And they're connected with the verb to be. You could say like this is that. You could call it equals, right? Like one of the deep conceptual mappings that I realized had become part of me was like, money is an object. Money is object. And I remember there was a time in my life prior to this that money was really easy. And I would talk about money like a river, money flows. And that was when I was representing money as liquid. And the thing is, when you have a tactile experience of money as an object versus money as a liquid, that emerges as two different ways of being around money. Object money orientation is like laborious. I have to pick it up. I have to carry it. When it's liquid, it's like you just have a role in its flow. And so it's coming into contact with like these different ways of experiencing reality. Another big one, which would probably be more directly accessible for people, is the experience I had around hunger when I was kind of investigating my relationship to food and eating. And I just had this meaning, like from a young age, that hunger is you need to eat. Like that was just like, that's what it is. You're hungry. That means you need to eat. So then I went in, and as I looked at that, it's like, how do I actually believe that? I was like, oh, that's like my mom said, if you're hungry, you need to eat. If that feeling means you should eat. It's like, I just believe that. That's just what was true for me. And then as I started to research, I'm big into etymology, the history of words, just to try, when a word means something, it's like what it used to mean. It starts to loosen its grip on you when you can start to look at it from different angles. And also like studying like from a medical perspective, what is hunger? And I learned about like, it's the feeling of the food being moved through your intestinal tract. And as your stomach empties, it needs to empty because then it starts to heal. And I was like, wait a minute. So the longer you're hungry, the more healing takes place. And that led me into learning about fasting. And so I got learning about this stuff. And then I was like, wait, hunger isn't you need to eat. Hunger is a sign that your body is healing itself. And I actually, like a mantra, like a practice, I taught myself that hunger is healing. And so I've created a conceptual map, a meaning for myself, that the more I'm hungry, the more healing is happening. And healing is something I already have value in. And so as I start to actually feel that way, as I started to actually believe that automatically, unconsciously, then when I started to feel hungry, I'd be like, I feel the benefits of healing and I feel motivated to continue this. And that gave me a lot of easy access to fasting. Whereas before I was like, I had to eat. Why did I have to eat? Because I had the metaphorical map that this feeling meant I had to do that thing. And so I've changed my relationship to the feeling through changing my meaning about the feeling, which has changed my actions and behaviors and changed my results. So if we can actually find out how we're thinking about the world and ourselves, and we can change that, then the thoughts that arise when we have an experience shift.
And most of this programming is done when we're kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we're running on kid programming.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
And you wonder why you look at some adults and go, they act like kids. They are.
Mm-hmm. Right. They are. Yeah.
Because they haven't updated their programming. And until
especially when something's emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
It puts us back into that even more.
Very much. I mean, when I asked you the question about how'd you learn about money growing up, it was very emotional for you.
Mm-hmm.
You went back to the childhood home, to the feelings.
Exactly.
And how that all comes together. Are most people conscious of their scripts?
No, not at all. And even the ones that are, there's like this layers of depth to script, right? And so there's always a deeper, and I would put myself in even the ones that are, there's always a deeper script that's playing out, something that's less obvious and more pervasive, like an I am something that's like everywhere, but you maybe just see the tip of the iceberg.
I was just editing an episode and I kept getting yelled at by the guest because he's like, did you hear what you just said? You said I am and I am.
Yeah.
He goes, are you aware of that? And I'm like, no.
Mm.
And it's like, I wasn't aware that I just said that.
Mm.
And it comes back to precision of language. You know, we're all talking. We're not listening even to ourselves.
I mean, it's a usefulness to not being conscious of what you're saying all the time. Otherwise, you'd be thinking about what you're saying all the time, which is probably an awkward conversation as well. But I also take his point that like being conscious of how often you're creating yourself through your speaking is a useful awareness to have too.
And that's what he was does. He was saying you're creating yourself, you're labeling yourself, you're doing these different things. And I need to keep being reminded so I can go back to that. And I think the big I am that most people struggle with is I am enough.
Yeah, that's the deep one. Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome that one?
The first thing I like to do is distinguish I am both enough and not enough. If I have a conversation with somebody to create a commitment for them as a client and they don't commit, I was not enough for them to commit. Like, it's not useful for me to be like, oh, it's just a numbers game. Hey, if they weren't ready, it's nothing to do with me. It's like, there's peace in that maybe because you're not like putting yourself at effect to that. But there's also like a lack of power in you not like being connected to your role in the creation of your world. And so it's like, I am both enough and not enough. Like I am love. Like what I am enough really is, or I'm not enough is I'm not lovable. I'm going to be alone. It's like, I'm totally lovable and I'm loving and I am loved. And I wasn't enough in that conversation to create that particular result. If I'm learning to ride a bike and I fell over, it wasn't enough to balance that bike yet. And I'm lovable and I'm loved and I'm safe and I'm connected. So it's like being able to be in touch with like, there's what your heart wants to feel. And then there's like the reality of your efficacy to create a certain result in the external world. And being able to be present with both of those in a way that has you feel safe and powerful, but also connected to the ground in a way that you can actually learn from your mistakes and learn from things that aren't working. And I think it's important. Like for me, the central thing in my work is like both and. It's important for us to be connected to both because I see big schools of thought that help people to create more peace and freedom, not by feeling enough no matter what happens. And they might be more relaxed, but they're not growing in their efficacy. They're not producing in the world. And then there's on the flip side, there's people that produce because they're afraid that they're not enough. And it's like, they're not enough. And it's like constant torment. And you can make shit happen in the world from fear. There's no doubt about that. But like, what's the fun? What's the point of a life where you're just stressed and not enjoying it? I mean, is it really a rich life if you're loaded in stress or unhappy? So I'm a champion for both. And that comes down to distinguishing examples like distinguishing not being enough, the inside and the outside. I'm always enough inside and I'm most of the time not enough on the outside. And I'm ready to learn about that.
Interesting. You've been talking about coaching a bit. Can people make these changes on their own? Or do we need someone to help us?
For me, it's a both, but it changes over time. And so I'm a fan of the work of Robert Kegan. He's a Harvard psychologist, and he has a model of what he calls adult psychological development. So he kind of realized that most models of psychological development ended around adolescence. But like, what if people kept growing up as they got older? And he did research, and he found what he would call 2 additional stages that some, not all adults go through. And the essence of that is like, there's a subject-object orientation. The first thing you do from like a teenage, if you grow up after you're 19, 20, you become what he calls from a socialized mind, which is someone that's able to integrate in society and have an opinion about themselves from this collective, but they become what they call self-authoring, and you're able to actually decide for yourself who you are. And that's kind of the essential piece of most, personal development. It's like, you can actually author your own life. You create your own identity. It's like, it's a great thing. And I think that having a coach is really helpful in learning to do that, because you could have people reflect back to you how you're thinking about yourself that you don't even realize. It's hard to see it when you're inside it. Super hard to see it. Could a person do it on their own? I mean, stuff happens. Sometimes when people have like a traumatic accident or some horrible thing happens, it kind of snaps them out of the matrix, and suddenly they can see an enlightenment experience. Maybe you read a book and a person's helping you that way. But I think in most instances, it takes somebody explicitly and uniquely reflecting back to us what we're experiencing, just like your podcast interview we had pointing out to the I am to you. Could you have noticed that? You might have heard it. If you listen to a phone recording of yourself, you might have noticed, but think more likely somebody pointing it out to you is going to help you to become aware of it, pointing out your thinking. So to me, obviously I'm a coach and a mentor, and like, that's, my primary orientation is going and getting help. And this is the point that I want to make. Once you hit a certain developmental level and you're able to be witness, not just to your own thinking, but to your thinking about your thinking. And this is Robert Kegan's point, is that there's a stage that some adults reach in later stage of life, which he calls the self-transforming stage. And that's where you become witness to your own authorship of yourself. So you notice that you are just this entity creating an idea about itself. And you can see that whole process happening. And as you start to develop the capacity to witness your own authorship, the whole idea of self itself starts to become something that you transcend, and you become capable of witnessing your own authoring and your own self-talk at a level that actually most people that you meet aren't going to be able to reflect back to you your own way of creating yourself as well as that you can. That doesn't mean there aren't people that are. I have mentors and coaches that I work with because they can still see me better than I can. But it just so happens that this stage of my life, there's most of the time people that I meet can't catch what's coming out of my mouth. That's actually a subjective created world as quickly as I can. And so I believe, and I share this because I think it's an important thing to acknowledge. Like, I was on another podcast recently, and it's like, this guy's like, works with CEOs of like Inc. 500 companies. And they're like, some of them are very resistant to having a coach. They don't think they need it. And I'm like, they're probably right most of the time, because most coaches they meet aren't going to be able to see what they can see as effectively as they can. Now, that doesn't mean they shouldn't have a coach. It means find one that can actually operate at your level, that can see what you can't see. So it's just a raising of the bar. So the answer is still yes, but I think it becomes harder to find those people. But I think it's worth the search.
Is that level what they kind of would call enlightenment? When you can,
that's not what Robert Kegan calls it. I certainly see parallels. The enlightened people that I've been around, people that I would call enlightened, have that relationship to the self that is very transcendent. They're happy to be this person in that context, that person in that context. They don't really believe that they're either of them. It's trippy. My mentor, Steve Hart, is in the work. Byron Katie are the people that I've spent the most time with up close to see that and to be like, whoa, this is some other level. This is beyond where I'm at. I can see that they're seeing things that I can't see. And that's what I'm drawn to.
So what do most people need to know? Like, and it comes back to what I call waking up, because that seems to be a theme in a lot of what I'm reading across different things, is that most people are going through life doing what they were told to do. And there's a process to, I guess, what's best termed waking up.
What do they most need to know? I mean, the stuff they most need to know is the stuff they can't see. So what they most need to know in order to wake up is that you are living in an experience that's being created by your mind and your meaning. And like, wake up to the fact that I think that the thing that you most need to know in order to wake up is to know that they're asleep. And that's kind of language is like a little bit off-putting, I think, because if you're, it's kind of like this, like the evangelical thing, like you need to be saved because you're on a path towards hell or something. It's like, dude, I don't want to listen to you. You just told me I'm going to hell. It's like if you tell somebody they're sleeping, need to like wake up. It's like, I can't imagine being drawn to that. And so I think for me, it's like, I talked about people not feeling free, right? Because it's like, you don't have to feel bad for not feeling free. It's not like as much of this is for me personally. And so if a person doesn't feel free, then what they most need to know is that they're creating the prison. This is the central theme of my work is creating. The company we're branding is called Creating Company. It's like everything you're experiencing is created by you. You are creating the lack of freedom. And you're doing it through how you make choices in the external world, but also more importantly, how you actually conceptualize reality. And we can have you be free for whether it's from your hunger or from your fear around money or whatever it is, by shifting your experience that you have because of the way that you create it. So for me, that's the biggest thing they need to know, is that they're creating the lack of freedom. They're creating the non-wokeness or sleepiness or whatever that they're experiencing. Whatever it is they don't want, they need to know that they're creating that. You are creating that. If there's somebody listening right now, whatever it is you don't want, you are creating that. You are creating that. You are creating that. And if that's threatening to you, move towards my work, because there's a lot of peace and freedom. Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Move towards where you're feeling resistance and fear. That's where the freedom is.
And that was Ryan Holiday's book, right? The Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah, I like that book. I love Marcus Aurelius. He said, what stands in the way becomes the way. And I take it even further than Ryan took it, which is like, I help my clients turn obstacles into their assets on a pragmatic level all the time. Whatever you think is a deficit is just strength. Whatever you think is a problem is an opportunity. Because the second line in Aurelius's meditations is, the impediment to action advances action. And so it's not just like, oh, we can get through this. Instead, it's like, if you take this thing, it actually becomes a thing that moves you forward more quickly.
I think this is one of those aha moments for people, is if you look at who people follow and who they want to listen to, it's people who've gone through a struggle, right? And overcome it. It's the hero's journey. And yet none of us want to go on the journey. We don't want to go through the struggle. And more often than not, the struggle's handed to us, or we've created it in our own mind. And the reality is we don't need anything from the world. We have everything we need within. It's learning to unlock it and to release it and to essentially peel your own layers.
Yeah. Yeah. Joseph Campbell talked about this too. I've studied a lot of his work. I love his work. And he talked about how actually the hero that's thrust into the adventure because of some tragedy. I mean, there's loads of those stories, but like actually the hero that has the most courage is the hero that like lives in the ordinary world and things are kind of okay. Like nothing bad has happened. It's just kind of like status quo. And it takes an extraordinary amount of courage to like listen to that little whisper. Maybe you listen to, Richer Soul podcast every week and you're like, and you do that. And it's just like every time you listen, it's like the call. You can kind of feel it. It's calling you. But like, you don't have to go and do something else. You could just keep getting by. And it's like the person that has the courage to follow that whisper, that's the real hero's journey. Like that's the adventure. And so, I make it my mission to entice and inspire people to cross the threshold. I use a lot of very powerful language and like powerful distinctions to like, really threaten a person's existence because I want to shake up their status quo. When I say threaten a person's existence, I mean like, have them see that the status quo is surreptitiously a prison, right? Like when I say like aggressive language, it's like you're like the idea that you're just getting by, like really kind of like twist the knife a little bit to have people be like, oh, wait a minute, this could be a lot better and feel the pain that I've become numb to. This is another answer to your, how do you, what do people know to wake up? They need to feel actually. Feel the sleepiness and what it's doing, to possibility and to I love twisting the knife with people who have kids. It's like, once you're like, oh wait, I don't want them to have the numbness. So, okay, now we got some fire under your ass. to be better for the sake of the implicit teaching that will happen.
Because the kids watch your actions. They don't watch your words. They are very good at doing that. And I know that for me, that was a big reason to do the things I did. My kids forced me into uncomfortable situations consistently.
Yeah, but just because they were there and you love them, not because they made you do it, right? Like,
they never said, Dad, do this. It was like,
right.
I want this for you and I'm not finding it, so I need to step up. Or the fact that most people don't step up. So, you show up at soccer practice and there's no coach. Someone's got to step up. Why not you?
Awesome.
You start doing that kind of stuff. And so that's what I kind of learned. And little by little, kids have the power to make us do that. From a money standpoint, that's actually one of the biggest motivators, they say, is if before you go buy stuff, you flash the kids' pictures in front of the purchasing decision, people are more apt to not spend money because they're like thinking about their family and their kids and making wiser decisions. So these kids are pretty powerful.
They are. I had a coach that said to me like years ago before I was married, she said, if you really want to make a lot of money, get married and have some kids. And I kind of laughed, but in hindsight, I was like, she was onto something, because my motivation to create more income and more importantly, to acquire wealth was certainly a result of having people that depend on me. And not just like that dependence, but like the love, like wanting to do it for their sake. It's like I'm more inspired to create a life for my kids than I am for myself now.
You've been speaking about language. Do you have any good resources or material that people can learn more about the precision of words?
I'll tell you an old school book that's one of my favorites. I've read it countless times. And then I would also just say, follow my work, because I talk about this stuff everywhere openly on the internet. But As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, it's like 100 years old, a little bit dated when it comes to like patriarchy and stuff like that. But like the essence of the message is beautiful and powerful. I love James Allen's work. So As a Man Thinketh. And then, my social media channels are a great way to find me. JP Morgan Jr., JP Morgan Jr. across the board, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere, YouTube, LinkedIn.
On all the platforms. So we always like to get people to take action. What's an action step people can take this week to move forward in their lives?
Move forward in their lives. Again, my background's physics, so I try to make it real simple mechanics. Where I want to be? How would I know if I was moving forward? This little journaling exercise. How would I know if I was moving forward? People say, I want to move forward. It's like just a concept, but like actually ground it. How would I know if I was moving forward in my life? And then I would say, like, how am I creating not moving forward? People want to be like, I'm just not doing something. But to me, a not is created just as much as a positive. A negative and a positive are both created. If I have a potential client conversation, the person doesn't make a commitment. It's like, how did I create that not client? It's to look at the absence of things as a created experience, a created outcome. How am I creating not moving forward? What am I doing? Who am I being that's having me not move forward? What am I thinking about the action that I would be taking if I was moving forward? I don't feel like doing it. Okay, how am I creating that? And so one of the core questions in our work is, how am I creating this? And so I'm essentially sharing with you a framework to help you to get to how am I creating this not moving forward? How am I creating this? And it's like, well, I'm just not feeling it. How am I creating that? Oh, I don't know. I guess I'm afraid of it. How am I creating that? How am I creating the fear? I'm just having it. Well, how am I creating that? And then you start getting into it. And it's like, whoa, I must be thinking about something that I don't like losing my house. Like, how am I thinking about losing my house? It's like, that's my answer, is to just take that question like a hammer and just keep smashing and smashing and smashing until there's only bits left. And then you usually find that there's a great sense of freedom, because you've actually come into contact with your agency to create your entire experience. And gives you a lot of power. Freedom and power are right there at the end of that question.
We all have agency. We don't all take it. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Knowing that I am happy and abundant no matter what happens on the outside. I said the other day in a branding meeting, I'm never satisfied, but I'm always happy. And the secret to my happiness is to be happy to be unhappy. Because inevitably things come up. I'm going to feel unhappy. If I'm not happy to feel unhappy, then I get more of that. If I'm happy to be unhappy, I get less unhappy and more happy more quickly. So happy to be not feeling abundant. It gives me great sense of abundance.
And it's all internal. It's our choice.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
A hard time with questions that have me wish things were different in the past, but I'm not trying to box you out. Let me be with this for a second. What did I learn later in life that I wish I learned sooner? That I was lovable even though I felt anger. Because anger really had a grip on me throughout my life. And then as I became more conscious of myself, I was angry that I was angry. I was angry at myself for I was being a person that got angry, and it was just like shit on shit. It just got, and now I love that I get angry. And that's like, I'm happy to be unhappy. Anger has much less power over me because I've acknowledged my powerlessness in the face of it. So through acknowledging my powerlessness in the face of anger, it has less power over me. I love that I get angry. I love that I have anger. And now I bring this concept to lots of things. I say, love to death what you hate. You love it. It goes. I wish I knew that when I was younger. I could have had a lot nicer relationships, but then I wouldn't have met my wife. So it all works out in the end.
And it's a process, right? It takes time.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're wishing you would have changed it. It's more to teach people the lessons that they can pick up earlier in their life by learning from you. That's really what it's all about. The last question is, if you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
It would go right back to where we started. It was just do what you love. Just do what you love.
And that's the essential fight between an 18-year-old and their parents. You have to be safe.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we'll see. You call me in 13 years, see if I'm willing to say that to my son at 18.
I have a feeling that you would be, because you kind of took that path yourself, did you not?
I very much did. Yeah. But my dad was an entrepreneur, and he was very adamant for me to get a job after college. I did it for 6 weeks. Then I went back to being an entrepreneur. But yeah, no, I hope I have done that myself, and I hope that I continue. I'm doing it from now at 5. I hope that I continue to. That's my plan and commitment anyway.
Sounds like a plan. We'll touch base in 13 years.
Okay, cool.
Where can people find you and connect?
Yeah, right now we're in the midst of a branding thing, because essentially my private coaching, personal coaching has turned into a company. And so soon we're going to have a new website creating company. But for the time being, jpmorganjr.com, jpmorganjr.com is my website. And again, that's my handle across all Facebook, social, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, jpmorganjr.
And we will make sure to put that in there so everybody can find it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky.
What's the life you're creating for yourself? And are you thrilled with it? It's just the beginning of the year, so you have plenty of time to accomplish what you want to do. I prefer quarterly goals because they keep us moving forward and they're time bound. Speaking of moving forward, this week's action step is, how am I not moving forward? And how am I creating that? More often than not, we are the biggest stumbling blocks to our success. What are you doing to face that obstacle? As I mentioned at the beginning, for me, it's a spiritual journey. Within, constantly refining the life I choose to live. Let's do 2020 differently. I'm excited for what we're going to accomplish together. Next week, I've got on Dr. Thomas George, and he's going to chat about health in flames. And it's not about diet and exercise. So stay tuned for the episode. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed it, would you share it with a friend? Thanks, and have a wonderful and abundant week.